Good morning / afternoon / evening, everybody. I am Southpaw Racer. iRacing's released 2 new cars. I'm gonna drive them. I'm gonna take a minute to explain what I'm doing here, but if you want to skip straight to the driving part, just go to this time code here, if you like, but I'd appreciate it if you stayed around. So, 2 modern GTE cars, or GTLM if your series is on that side of the Atlantic. Fuck yeah, the Ferrari 488 and the Ford GT. They are both fast, aerodynamic, mid-engine, twin-turbocharged, rear-wheel drive, expensive, successful, fire-breathing monsters. They're both pretty similar on paper, just one's from Italia and has a V8 and the other's from America and has a V6, and this one kind of pushes the definition of a road-derived GT car as it was designed to be a race car first, but that's a discussion for another time. I'm going to be testing these cars out, figuring out how they drive, and comparing them against each other on 2 circuits, Le Mans and the Nürburgring WEC layout. Why? Because they race at both of these tracks in real life. Le Mans has long straights, Nürburgring has corners, and I don't really like COTA. 75% track state, marbles and dust clean, default iRacing weather, baseline setup on both cars, 3, 2, 1, go! Anyway, Le Mans first in the Ferrari. Sounds like a Ferrari. Oh shit. Yeah, alright. Okay. Pushing a bit hard into Indianapolis. But I was able to hold it, which is good. So far I'm actually quite impressed with how responsive this car is to, like, not killing you, if that makes sense. Oh shit, I'm gonna get a slowdown here. Wonderful. I do like, though, how chuckable it is. It's quite nice. Like, I'm able to pitch it into the corner, and it doesn't really break free massively. Corner exit. Traction control definitely helps. I am still only doing, like, my first laps in the car, but I'm finding it sort of difficult to judge steering input. Like, I feel like at initial turn-in there's a lot of bite, and as I go through the mid-corner, that grip sort of goes away a little. So I don't know, maybe I'm not, maybe I just need to turn in a little later, take advantage of that. But I am quite impressed with how late this thing can brake as I mess up the Mulsanne chicane. Number 1. But yeah, this thing can brake pretty easily. I'm finding it very similar in how I brake to the HPD ARX01C, the LMP2 car. This thing sort of has the same electronics configuration as the HPD in that it has traction control, but not ABS. Unlike the GT3 cars, which are full-on mash the pedal to the floor under the brakes. And I've never quite been able to get my head around that, which is why I don't really drive the GT3 cars all that much anymore. They come into Mulsanne Corner. It's pretty nice under throttle, I have to say. Through the high-speed corners, I don't know if it's because I'm still in prototype mode for Le Mans, but I'm finding it entertainingly slidey. through the high-speed stuff. Like here at Indianapolis, I'm probably going in there a bit too hard. Definitely went in there a bit too hard. There is some challenge to... Whoa. Managed to keep the mash there. There definitely is a bit of challenge to finding the right sort of threshold to brake at. Like, I'm finding a bit of a softer, more conservative style of braking on my potentiometer spring brake pedal. I am running a conical rubber brake mod as well, so that's probably a bit of a another factor, but I'm finding it pleasurable to brake, and it's quite nice on corner exit as well. Of course, I mean the sound is fantastic as usual. And it handles curbs very nicely. But I remember the days on iRacing as I do an absolutely abysmal 357. I remember the days on iRacing where you couldn't even look at a curb and you'd be sideways. I'm glad to see that that's different now. Especially here at Le Mans, where curbs are part of a balanced diet. Oh, don't go off, thank you. Jeez, that initial turn in. And of course, I ruined my lap. Well, in terms of, I guess lap time doesn't really matter. I'm looking more for top speed than anything at Le Mans, so I think it's time to try the Ford. Alright, the Ford. Give this a go. Like, I don't know why people shit on the sound of this thing so much. I don't mind it. Like, there are plenty of better sounding engines out there, but it's not, like, absolutely horrible. Whoopsie. Oh god, what a way to start a lap. Wonderful. Well, this Ford, I like it so far. Like, the first thing I'm noticing about it compared to the Ferrari is it feels faster. I don't know if that's because I'm lower to the ground in the Ford or not, but it definitely feels like I am going faster, and I feel like I'm able to attack the corners more in this Ford. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's the Ford GT is a controversial car. It's technically a prototype because it was designed for Le Mans first, and then as a road car, as opposed to the usual way of getting a road car and turning it into a race car when it comes to LMGTs. Into the first chicane at Le Mans. On throttle. Yeah, quite nice. It does feel pretty similar to the Ferrari in that, like, you've got that... I don't know, like, the Ferrari, you definitely have that initial sort of, that initial stab on turning. The Ford is a little more, it's a little bit slower to respond on initial turn-in, but in a good way. And I feel that it sort of maintains its grip through the corner a little better. At least that's what I'm feeling through the wheel. I could be talking out of my ass here. Whoopsie. Run wide and Mulsanne. On throttle, it feels, I don't know, relatively similar to the Ferrari. I feel like I can push quite a bit. It's catchable thanks to the TC. In terms of top speed, I'm getting well over 280. Into Indianapolis we go. Dear. I'm finding I'm locking the brakes a little bit more in the Ford. I don't know if that's because, like, the feeling of being able to attack more is giving me, like, more confidence under the brakes, or if I'm actually getting faster exit speeds than the Ferrari and am ending up applying the brakes later as a result. It feels better through the Porsche curves than the Ferrari does. Like, there's still that GT typical understeer sort of thing. You're fighting the car the whole way through, but it feels a little more controllable. It feels like you've got a little more say in what the car does than the Ferrari. Well, out of the final turn we go. A 356.7. I mean, that was a pretty average lap of Le Mans. Let's see how we go through the chicane this time. Yeah. Feels like on initial turn in there is a little more understeer. But like through here, through the S's, I'm able to go completely flat. Whereas in the Ferrari, I just sort of lift a little. Like through this opening section of the circuit, the Ford feels miles better than the Ferrari. Whoopsie. Oh dear, okay. There we go. That's a spin. Alright. Taking the Ferrari out at the Nürburgring Grand Prix Strecke. Of course, the BES and WEC layout, which makes the last chicane more swoopy. And this is where I'm gonna have a look at lap time and how they really attack the corners. Once again, I'm running baselines set up on these cars, so no settings changed at all. Yeah, I could definitely feel... I felt it at Le Mans, but I'm feeling it here as well. The Ferrari does feel a bit softer than the Ford does. But I'm actually quite surprised at how attackable these turns are. You can basically just smash on the throttle and not have to worry about anything. It's great. Right. Brake early for the... It's not the Vidal chicane anymore. For fuck's sake. What am I doing? Alright. Out of the last turn at Nürburgring. Let's give this a fucking go. So down into turn 1, I'm gonna pick the pit exit. Down into first gear for the first turn. Probably could have afforded to be a little more aggressive on throttle there. Definitely, it feels nice through this section. Oh wow, that feels good. I think I'm figuring out the Ferrari a bit more here, with the fact that You sort of gotta keep the turn up as you go through the turn. That doesn't make any sense. Like, keeping the steering input sort of... You know, you're sort of working it a little through the turn to keep the car going. I'm fairly sure you can take that flat out on a qualifying lap. Went way too hard into that turn. It's a very misleading turn, that. Ugh, God. Messed up those turns massively. There's a bit more to talk about than here at Le Mans, here than at Le Mans. Down into third gear. Okay. Ah, I could really feel the use of the traction control out of there. Was leaning on it just a little bit. So that's a 1 minute 55 for my first lap. Let's try for another one. Ooh, lock the brakes a bit. I like this. Lean on the TC, and that's an off track. Alright, so exiting the last turn in the Ford on the first hot lap, which I've cut because I made a mistake. The 55.2 initially, but I got an off track. Let's see how fast we can really go. I feel like in the initial braking phase, the Ford feels a little better than the Ferrari down into the first turn. And one thing that I am definitely feeling in the Ford is in the slow stuff, it feels like it's on a bit more of a knife edge than the Ferrari. I don't know if that's due to driving style or a stiffer setup or whatever. But I really find that in the high-speed corners, the Ford shines. Like, through here, I don't feel as confident on the throttle as I do in the Ferrari, or as confident in the mid-corner, but here, through the Schumacher S... Oh! And as I say that, I make a mistake. This is why you should always think up stuff as you go along. Don't think about things to say before you go and do a lap. Because something like that might happen. Look, I mean, in terms of lap time, they're close. At least in my experience. I'm sure we'll find, like, among you know, the thousands of people doing laps in these things, that one car may or may not have an edge over the other at one track, and, you know, I feel like the Ferrari might be the more popular choice at first because it's a Ferrari, but the car that most people drive will definitely be determined by which one is faster, and I feel like one is going to be overall faster. Which one that is, I'm not quite sure. But what I'm finding at the moment is that at Le Mans, I prefer the Ford, and at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, I prefer the Ferrari. But either way, I hope you enjoyed that little comparison between the two cars. I think an opportune thing to do here would be to do a side-by-side comparison of a lap around the Nürburgring in these cars, so that we can compare turn-in points, my reactions to things, how I'm getting on the throttle, all that sort of stuff. So I guess I'll roll that at the moment. So, my final thoughts on these two cars. They are very well matched according to the experience I've had with them so far. My optimal in the Ford is basically a 1 minute 54 flat, while my optimal lap in the Ferrari is only about a tenth behind. I'm sure I could go faster in both cars with more time and practice, but I feel like there's more potential for improvement in the Ferrari. But like I said earlier in the video, there's a fair chance that one car will end up being favoured by the majority, as usually happens in sim racing. Which car that will be remains to be seen. In terms of how they drive compared to each other, I feel parallels to the Audi and Mercedes GT3 cars when they first came out. The Ford is much like the Audi was. It feels stiffer. It seems more difficult to drive out of the box, and I felt like I reached the limit of grip a little more easily, which resulted in me overdriving it a bit. While high-speed turns felt lovely in the Ford, it also felt like mistakes were punished more severely. The Ferrari reminds me of the Mercedes. It feels softer and grippier, and initial turn-in feels much more aggressive than the Ford. However, the limit for me, especially in the mid-corner, is harder to find and maintain. Where in the Ford I felt like I was doing too much, in the Ferrari I felt like I wasn't doing enough. I ended up having a similar experience to the Mercedes when I was just trying to go fast in the Ferrari. I knew I had plenty of time to make up, I just didn't know where to start. And that's why I ended up being slower in the Ferrari at the end. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed both cars and would recommend either of them, and I look forward to giving one of them a race. I'm Southpaw Racer, I'm a sim racer, I make videos about that and other stuff, and I will see you at the first corner. Goodbye.